Okay, it's three, two, one. Hopefully, we're all visible and audible. It's the same cast with a new guest, but as you can tell, we've reshuffled the host because, well, as you can tell by the guest, we'll probably have very similar answers, so it doesn't make much sense of me also participating into the questions themselves. But regardless, we have a fair bit of conversations in store. We'll get into specific questions about Sarim himself because we won't be having him on as a frequent person on the podcast. Plus, he's a pretty interesting dude who probably has some interesting takes about debating. But in general, we'll talk about the circuit, how it's concluded, any storylines that emerged during the circuit. We'll probably also paint a comparison between the circuit now compared to when we were active speakers. And then we'll conclude by talking about some general stuff about like what's next. So, firstly, the season's obviously largely concluded. I know there's some other stuff that is going to be happening, like US is happening this weekend, but at large, I guess it's fair to say that the circuit, for the most part, the debate season this year has concluded. And we saw a lot of storylines emerged, and we've briefly talked about how a lot of us have come back, and that's like pretty much like a storyline in and of itself. But there are other storylines that we can probably dive deep into as well. So I guess firstly, let's talk about Sarin because like the specific question that I would ask you is like, so Bud, how was it like coming back and maybe potentially arguably being in the best team of the circuit with, I don't know, like some random dude.
Wow, Navaz, what best team do you mean by that?
I don't know. It could be anybody. It could be the team that just spoke LSE, but they didn't win. So it's probably some other team.
We also didn't win anything either, though, Nawaz. So I don't know which team we're talking about here. Did we win some?
We
Oh,
won three
IODC, I
things.
guess. We did win IODC. And RDO, we won two tournaments. My brain is slow. It's been a vibe. I definitely didn't know the uni circuit super well before I came back, so it's definitely been an introduction to Pakistan's university circuit. But from what I understand, a lot more depth. I'm glad the character is still there. Like we still have very charismatic like speakers with history, like a dog, like a real like I want to win and be the best that could ever be. So that's been really cool.
Okay, okay. So like I would like to poke like some specific questions like, and this is like open ended like to the floor in general. What have your takes been like in terms of like the circuit this year? Like favorite debaters that maybe potentially stood out, storylines like Hassan Butt has recently conquered the Dinos, and like there are just other stuff as well. Like, and we've discussed this in like private spaces about like how Daud Karl is probably one of the greatest speakers to ever emerge in his age, but probably doesn't have the record that he should have because like the circuit has decided to be ultra competitive. So, what's everybody's take on this? And we'll start with you, Sarim, again. Um, like, what's your take on like all these young kids that have been participating and how you've interacted with them and how they've been doing, and anybody that specifically stood out to you?
I love these young kids. I love Daniel Hassan. I love Jazib and Bud, and I love Dawud and Bhakti. And Dawud
Sorry,
is
I'm
cool.
just cutting you off a second. Move a little closer. Your audio's a little far away, I think.
My bad. I think I'll start with Daud. Obviously, I think Daud is the test case for like why discretionary lists should exist and why speakers outside the DSP should still be allowed to participate. Boy has just killed it. Like I came back, I kept hearing about this wonder kid Daud, and he blew me away. But it's also interesting because it's like this should be his circuit. Like he should be dominating everybody. It's his misfortune that all of us have decided, nay, humne bhi, we're also part of this, bro. Like, kaise, you have to fight for your throne. And unfortunately, boy is fighting though. Boy does fight, and I think it's really really inspiring to watch him fight too.
I
The
like how
second ones
Salim
are obviously
implies.
GCU.
Yeah, like I like how Salim
Oh,
implies it's just one like 18-year-old kid destroying us, but like as referring back to Hassan, but like in a world of dinosaurs, there's quite a lot of asteroids, man. Like
there's a load of Astro.
there's
Yeah.
I so yeah, like I think you were mentioning more, sorry.
No, no, go for it. Because like, yeah, the GCU team, insane. Like, I think these boys are gonna bring style as a category back to BP. But I'll let someone
Acha,
else
I
speak
actually
on that.
don't think it's just the GCU kids. This is like the unfair bit because, and I think we'll get to this later as well. Like back when I used to debate, आप used to get a fourth, and then like आपके अगले दो तीन round like first होता था मतलब like इसीलिए आते थे आप. And now like you get a fourth, and then there's like a bunch of like school kids like ISL and teams जो आके आपको तबाह कर देती हैं. Then like you get a fourth there, and then there's like another room जहाँ पे you have like dinos like you making a comeback. So till like any stage, matlab, I've stopped getting easy rooms. Is
Yeah.
I think like the big thing.
Yeah, Pele, you'd have a moment of relief. Like when you'd lose, it would suck, obviously, but it would also be a sense of, oh, finally, now I get to go to the easy room and, aram sukoon se jeet ke aayenge. Now I go to the easy room and there's a bunch of like little it's messed up, right? Because now there's whenever you go to an easy room, there's like three ISL teams there, and they're all dumping six arguments apiece. And if you're not on your A game, you're just finished, right? There's like a bunch of little drugged up little debaters, like who are definitely on some sort of debate performance enhancing drug, clawing at your ankles and trying to pull you down with like 50 arguments at a time. It's
And
not
you think
easy
like
anymore.
reps been messed up? Like matlab, like पहले used to have rep. Like I used to go to a middle room वहाँ पे like the judge did not know how to judge, and like आप जाके उन्हें intimidating तरीके से बोलते थे कि आप जीते हो, and then you used to win. And matlab this was the point of debating. But now like middle room में like random judge at his third tournament understands what like weighing up is. And
Yeah.
matlab, why do I have to still come up with arguments and content? Matlab, like what is the point of experience then?
Jo,
But
I'm
I
hoping
guess,
with the
oh,
I'm
sorry to,
hoping with the amount of I'm hoping with the amount of praise that we've offered to ISL and Park team at this point that we finally found some favor with their feminist king coach Hassan Kesser. He didn't quite like our comments from the last one.
I
oh,
don't know,
that's,
matlab, like we keep getting pluses and minuses. So, matlab, our representative at the recently concluded LSD, matlab, I don't think cordial relationships have been established. Ambassadors have failed.
Peace has not been made.
I think that's more of a cap issue that's being manifested over here. Maybe some internal cap beef. Hassan was pretty nice to me.
I
But
just want to say, Hassan ne mujhe to 81 pakraya hai, so clearly the podcast and Hassan Kaisar are on very good terms.
I think the same. I would have to agree. I would have to agree. But I would say that the reason why most of us do choose to come back, because it's not like dinos have not been interacting with the debate circuits in the past, but maybe perhaps weren't actively competing as such, is because the circuit's so good. Like for me, I understand like that was a major reason why I decided to compete again. Because I remember telling Saran the idea is IODC, Shajivna, Lamsaivi, and it's been I've probably spoken 7 or 8 tournaments at this stage.
Never
So
stopped.
it's because it's so competitive that it's fun.
Yeah. It's fun.
So Imad, because you haven't really, you have competed, but probably not to the same extent. What's it like judging the circuit over the years, and what's made it better? Like, what are traits that specifically make the speakers today better, or like from speakers of the past?
Well, if we're comparing to, I think the biggest change that we noticed was obviously the Corona COVID pandemic, and the way that that shifted debate, and obviously it made debate challenging for a lot of Pakistani institutions because debate shifted online, and they perhaps either didn't have the resources or just didn't have the willingness to sit in front of a computer and debate. But what it did do, not just for me, because I personally feel myself having improved significantly as a result of online debating. I'm sure other people feel the same as well. That it, at the very least, raised the standard. Firstly, at the schools level, i.e., school students became far more familiar with the method of international debating, which was emphasizing, let's say, more content. It was emphasizing perhaps smarter strategy, etc. And similarly, within the university circuit, I think the threshold, like the baseline, increased quite a bit, i.e., simply because enough people became familiar with the way that debating was taking place internationally that the threshold was raised, the quality was necessarily raised. And I think even last year, having seen multiple turn-ins last year and this year, I did notice that one, debating on average is better, like speakers on average are better. I think speakers on average are also perhaps, I'm going to use the word more, like debating is more normal now, i.e., I think like there were often lots of really, really wild things happening before COVID. You'd hear stories of completely unbelievable things happening. Oftentimes those things were also like equity related issues, and I think all of those have gone down significantly as well. So I think like debates in a much better place than it used to be.
Cool. So Usher, going back on the storylines bit, there's a specific storyline that you are specifically very tied to this year. Should we tell the world that I paid you off before the Lumps IV final, or was there that the actual decision?
So this one was actually fun because multiple people paid me off, and like in the end, it simply came down to whoever like paid off the largest amount. So for like everyone in the future, matlab, if you are sending one amount, like you make it big, matlab, don't think you saving money wahan pe. But like Imad's point actually like on debaters and judges becoming more knowledgeable, and I think I was discussing this with Masood a few months ago. It's also that the debate crowd has become more knowledgeable, like the environment around the crowd, like even admins etc now like have sort of some understanding like what a coach should have, and everything around that also. So like coaches are now being hired on like actual skill more than rep, and I think like proof of that is very very young coaches being hired. And I think this was a trend that started in my years, that like a lot of extremely old coaches started disappearing and more up with the meta coaches started coming in. Alongside that, obviously people I think are now willing to bring more serious judges, so like not just as debaters, as participants. Like you know that old thing where you used to just bring apna school ka koi bhi random dost like who genuinely could not had never seen a parliamentary match before. Like I don't think you see stuff like that anymore happen. Like even the judges you bring have like a bare minimum. So I actually like I think agree with Imad on that.
Yeah, I think there's been a definite shift from like the 2014-ish era when debates was largely just vibes with a little bit of technicality thrown in, to the modern era where there's still vibes, but there's a much greater focus on formal rules. Like the things I saw in the early era of debating were ridiculous. I've not seen this one directly, but I've heard stories of people losing matches by margins of 80, which is mathematically impossible. I recall very famously that the HSN KGS Nationals final of either 2013 or 14 was apparently for some judges decided on content that came in the fifth minute of a reply speech, which, if you read the judging manual, you're not meant to consider. But
Fifth minute.
rules were more guidelines than anything back in the day, so it's good to see that some stuff has changed. Admittedly, this does mean there's a little bit less character in some of the ways we speak, but worthy trade off, worthy trade off.
Yeah.
Now there's actually some sort of structure to the thing, and we're not lost in the anarchy of MUN.
Okay. Well, Tal, specifically on you as well, because obviously your return probably motivates these young kids the most because you're probably the guy that they look up to the most because you have the best produced video available on the internet, on Hamza Jami's YouTube page, available for mass viewing. Um, with that in mind, what does it feel like to lose to all these young whip speakers and have them coming for your throat at every single tournament, knowing that beating them probably doesn't do a lot for you, but beating you does a lot for them?
I'll be honest. Technically, this is a very old problem. So, as early as 2015, people started refuting me by name. That doesn't sound very strange, but normally when you refute somebody, like it's typical to say they said XYZ or the opposition said something. In my case, it was always so Taha Masood said, and then there'd be a series of very mean comments passed off as rebuttal after. So I've been used to like the target on my back for a very long time. The difference is now they've started winning, and I'm not going to lie, it takes a moment to get used to it. Like I haven't lost to a school kid in an astonishingly long time until this Shajivna, where, as you're aware, I ended up losing the final to Daud Cuddle and also to Alizar and MBA. So big pain there. I was fine with it because, it was pretty obvious that especially Daud was like a wonder kid. And, again, as Sarah mentioned, this kid would be stomping any circuit which wasn't populated by the best, greatest speakers of like the past 5 circuits or something. So that was okay. Then I lost the LSE final with Sarim to Jazib and Butt, which I just want to say, I think Daud Kharal would have had the best storyline this year if it wasn't for Jazib and Butt. Because the amount of swag those kids have been bringing to these tournaments has been unmatched. Like, Jazib is straight up putting on his shades before he raises POIs in the final and then taking them off if he gets accepted. Like, exactly, this is what it looks like. Meanwhile, like, Hassan Butt, after beating us, is putting up Instagram posts about asteroids destroying the dinosaurs. Frankly, there's no way that any storyline can compete with what these kids are doing on the basis of just pure debate talent, which is why, unfortunately, even though Dawood is a wonder kid, it's just not as interesting as what these two crazy people are up to. Like, I mean, again, at the Lums Ivy, these guys are going into every debate room writing "wretched of the earth" versus 1% in neat little fonts on the blackboards. There's just character and drama oozing out of them, and I'm glad to be a part of this story. If I have to be hit by an asteroid for them to happen, that's fine, perfect.
There's a
Yeah,
real
and you say,
poetry.
like someone said, the circuit doesn't have much personality, but I'd say like these kids, like not just kids anymore, so a lot of them are in uni, have like brought in a lot of personality. And like beyond that, like this is the first time that some 16-year-old Chintu came up to me after a final speech and said कि आपने ये वाला rebuttal क्यों नहीं दिया था? And so like matlab, there's like a bunch of people on the circuit who are very active. And what I really like about this is there's a lot of people who are now in unis and beyond who really like debating. Like I think we went for a long time where debaters hated the fact that they were debaters. Like it was lame, toxic, like whatever. And now people are proud slash happy कि वो हम like सब nerds हैं and like हम tournament पे आ रहे हैं and बहुत fun होता है. And I think a big part of that is कि like you have not lost personality, like it's changed, but yeah, you've lost like a lot of the old things that used to be fun for newer
Yeah.
ones.
I just want to
So
cut in really quickly before this conversation moves onward. The stakes of losing have never been higher. Because now, pehle to, you lost and it will, ठीक है, you lost and, the circuit makes a little bit of fun of you. Now you lose. Within 5 minutes, Daniel Hassan shows up and tells you what you did wrong. And then Hassan Butt has put up a post in Pakistan debating memes, immortalizing your loss. There's no safety in losing anymore. Now it's like a triple threat. You have to be mentally prepared the moment that the win goes to anybody else.
I think just to
I
jump
mean, the
off of
best
that.
part is that we got to witness Jazib become
Yeah,
like the 1% amongst the wretched
it
throughout
makes
this.
it makes
But
the
specific question that I want to ask to everybody. Sorry, what did you want to say, Saran?
I was gonna say, just to jump off of Usher's point about like how people are more involved. I think that one shout out that we need to give is to Shanavar. Like I think it's a tangential storyline, but it's Shanavar's presence is both unique and really productive for the circuit. And it's like he's crafting a niche, like a content lines and storylines, like making documentaries with Lams Asians, making documentaries with Shajivna. Like it's beautiful, and like I'm really excited to see what comes out of that, because I think that's also going to add on to the effect of like both making people interested but also normalizing debates to some degree. So shout
Yeah,
out to
shout
him.
out to Schnauber. We all love him. If you're an editor, go to him. You really need to. Um, but again, so to round this conversation off, I just want to quickly ask everybody what was their favorite debate memory from this circuit this year, or favorite debater even, and not just like on a competitive level, even just like as a person, maybe comedically or style wise or anything. And we'll start with you, Saram.
No, you have to go take
Okay,
a
you
nap.
need time. I can tell.
You
Imad,
take
what
off.
about you?
Yeah, I think probably still the most comedic moment, and the three of us are commemorating this moment, and I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you how. Is that during the Shajivna final, when myself and Laiba at closing government and Asher and Masood at opening government, and after I've given my speech, I'm feeling more confident than I should be, given the end result. But at that point, I write on a piece of paper "Gov bench" and I write three question marks, and then I hand it to Usher. And then Usher and Masood both look at me from across the bench and they give me a thumbs up and they nod their head and everything. And obviously, we know that it was not Gov bench. And I think the comedic element of that is something extremely memorable. And I think the ability to laugh at ourselves in terms of how perhaps misplaced our confidence was. And the way that we're commemorating it is that when Masood, Ashar, and I are going to be speaking Diliman in Debate Open from the University Philippines Diliman in a couple of weeks, our team name is, of course, very aptly Gov Bench, three question marks.
Love it.
And like an addendum to Imad's story, because like we were like our convincingness went so ahead that at some point during op whip speech or whatever, like एक POI का मौका आता है, and at that point like मसूद उठ के ना like एक beautiful sounding POI पूछता है something along the lines of like the nihilistic philosophers of the world la 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 la. And me and Imad both with awe just like look at Masood, our debate coach, think यार मजा ही आ गया.
Never beating the student allegations.
Repeating the student allegations. What about you, Tha? Any debaters who stand out? Any memories? Any debates that specifically stand out?
Two different answers. Insofar as debaters that stand out, because I only get to see him so rarely and such a treat every time, it's Ali Hanfia, because all of his speeches are funny. This is something which a lot of speakers on the circuit are lacking. Ali Hanfia's speeches are invariably, there's a joke in there somewhere. Like, I recall, I think this was last year's Lums Ivy final, he tried to bribe the panel. Quite visibly and openly at one point. He started pulling like 100 rupees notes out of his pocket and telling them they can have it. So Ali Hanfia is great. In terms of favorite debate memory, competitively, I think we have the same one of us, which is winning the Lums Ivy and being like, oh, great, especially since it was like a proper bad tournament for us. Like, we were not doing well. We barely broke like seventh or eighth or something. But I think the actual favorite memory I have is from LSE, because round 3 there was very funny. Context for anybody who's not aware, the round was basically about imagining you're an average debater who's going to possibly quit debating, whether or not you should. As you can imagine, just turned into a lot of self-referential humor. We all made a lot of fun of Imad. We said if Imad had quit debating early on in his career, then look, how would he have won 2 Shah Lots of horrible things were bandied around, and I asked people to like and subscribe to this very podcast, so please do that. And it was just a very funny room. It was a good time.
That was hilarious.
It was a good
Great.
time, especially
It was
after the
great.
decision.
Um,
Sarin, what about you?
I think mine would with Jasmine or Ashir. Jasmine.
You,
Mine
Sarin.
would definitely be Lums Ivy ka aakhri prelim. Um, just because walking in the room, I think Hanfi and I were favorites. And then everyone else was clearly like there, but like this is definitely a room that could make or break it for a lot of teams. And just everyone said like you guys have to take the fourth, and we all break. And we had no intention of taking the fourth. Like I didn't know that CO opposite me, the CO is like people who work. The round was about gig economies, and it happened to be that the people opposite us were experts in gig economies. And to be fair, हमने भी काफी मनवाई थी, लेकिन there was no intention to take that fourth, but we did take that fourth, and it felt less bad because everyone else broke. And I have a good excuse for saying that that's why I underperformed that round.
Fair play. Ashir, anything to add? Or is it the same Imad memory
No,
from
no,
that?
I had the same one as Masood actually. Like that round 3, like I think is genuinely one of the most fun rounds I've spoken in a while. Like, yeah, like 3 good teams. Nawaz and I have special memories from that round for winning. It's the one time Imad has judged me जब उसने decision सही दिया है. But yeah, like I think it's that round for me.
No,
All
that round was
right.
peak. That was
With
peak.
that, around was peak. Second part of this discussion. So obviously, a lot of us used to debate when debating in the circuit was much different. Like equity didn't exist. Um, a lot of these caps were probably not as well trained. You expect everybody to take a judge test these days. Debating in general, post COVID, I would say, has become much more standardized, and there's just a lot of more content for people who are coming up to debates to engage with. Um, with that in mind, how do you think? And we'll go first with Taha. How do you think the circuit has changed when you were actively speaking, both in university or in school, compared to now? And what are the major differences that stand out to you?
Well, I mean, harkening back to what we mentioned a moment ago, it's a lot more professional, I want to say, quote unquote. Everybody's better. Everybody's following the rules more. People are taking things seriously. Crucially, second speaker arguments have finally evolved beyond precedent set, international image, and organic change, which was like the holy trio for second speaker arguments back in the day. People have started listening to speakers who aren't second speakers, which was also not really something that used to happen. Like back in the day, either you were second in reply or you were a glorified resource on the team very frequently. There were a lot of one-man teams back in the day. The judge test thing you note is actually quite funny because I just recall, like, I think I was around for the advent of the first professional judge tests, like the ones where proper testing started happening. And this was right after my Pak team. So in 2015, the beginning of the circuit, I recall that the judge test was actually the Pakistan versus Singapore semifinal we lost. The funny thing is, arguably, that's not a very good judge test because everybody knows who lost. And if you've watched the decision, you also have a really good idea of why they lost and that it's a 7-0, so it's probably not that close. In spite of this, two people inside the national judge test end up giving it to Pakistan. And you might think, who are these no name randoms who ended up making this awful decision? They're not no name randoms. These are, in fact, our good friend Hassan Kesser and the coach of that team, Sufyan Sultan, who maintained at that point that Pakistan did not deserve to lose. So, in any case, the major takeaway, apart from that being very funny, is judge testing started happening, which meant when you started going into lower rooms, things improved, and it's only gotten like iteratively better with like every passing year. So judges now are genuinely pretty good. Like if you run into Ali Hanfia or Shah Jahan or any of you guys inside a room, then you're going to receive international level judging, critique, OA, everything. So it's pretty good. Back in the day, you could not get anything remotely resembling that. Like I recall, I lost a BP round one time because we got rebutted too much, which makes sense. That makes sense for the team that rebutted us. Obviously, then they've beaten us, but it makes no sense for the other two teams to beat us for that, but they did. So judging has changed. I'd say arguably mostly for the better. Everything's become more professional, and the rules now formally exist.
Fair. Sarim, what about you? Because you don't not only have you had a big gap between circuits when you were actively speaking in Pakistan before and now, but you also spoke in the US circuit, which is a circuit that a lot of, I would say most Pakistani debaters who graduate don't necessarily partake within it too much, but also is a circuit that is kind of demonized because I was in the UK and it wasn't the NA circuit wasn't necessarily looked at in the fondest of lights. So, what are major takeaways of things that you've learned there, and how does that compare to our circuit?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's true. Like I think NA circuit it's very like it's in its own bubble, which has meant that a lot of the idiosyncrasies, and I think it's like so close to like APTA and policy, which are just such awkward formats of debating that I think it's like there's a lot of diffusion that happens between them, which means that like it's become this really weird vacuous bubble. But despite that, I think that post COVID, I think what was most surprising is that there's more similarities than differences. Like I think that a lot of speakers have developed a very similar structure, which I think goes back to Imad's point that like we have sort of seen an internationalization of debates, which has meant that like I was actually surprised at how much felt similar versus how much was different. So like speakers now have much more structure. There's a certain level of like analysis that's given, and like there's a lot more structured analysis. For instance, like I've never heard terms like process analysis, impact analysis. Like these are questions that are being asked by like random Islamabadis, not random Islamabadis. Shamila's a person and very cool, but like lots of random people ask these at tournaments, right? And it's like it's shocking to me that like these are things that I've never asked. So it's like there's definitely become a lot more of like a curiosity and like sort of like overly structuring, overly rigidities around debating that definitely weren't there before. I think before like people came and were like, yeah, like hum bas bolenge, uh, whatever comes out, and like there's less creativity almost, but there's more of this like thinking about every step of the way, like what it means to debate and like how we get through it, which I was not present when I was around back in schools even.
I want to push back there for a second because Sarim's claiming that there's not that much different, and yet Sarim बहुत तमीज से POI खड़ा करता है. He stays in his seat and raises his hand and says point, point. So I think there must have definitely been a bit of culture shock when like ISL
Yes.
trained teams would all get up, three people standing up aggressively the moment that the 1 minute mark hits and the protected
That's
minute
true.
ends.
That's true.
There's some serious differences here, Sarim.
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
got some mind games here you didn't experience on the NA circuit.
I mean, to be fair, I was in a debate against Imad with Sarim where Imad took the hand raising as offensive. he was very angry
I'd never seen it
at
before.
the hand being risen.
well, the KC
सही
semi,
बात
they
है, like
said that my hand
बदतमीजी
was
है, मतलब
distracting.
stand up. I am standing up to give my speech. You stand up to interrupt my speech.
In fact, in
Yeah.
Casey, two kids said that, Sarim, please take your hand down. They never said anybody to sit down. They never told anybody to sit down.
No,
But
it's
they
just
told
the
Sarim
hand.
to put his hand down, which I found
Which
was a bit funny.
which is ironic because the hand is like because it's less intrusive. Like I don't want to interrupt your flow. Like say what you have to say. Just like I have a question. If I stand up, it's like you have to take it. But
My
You
theory
it's
is
often
that
not
it's
happened.
because he always raises his tattooed hand.
I
it could be.
try
Yeah.
not to actually.
Imad had a very funny narrative recollection of this. Imad, if you could please share with the class.
My narrative recollection was just that in that particular motion, in that particular debate round, when we were already struggling to make sense of a motion that was already more of a run-on sentence than it was a motion, and myself at Prime Minister, I'm trying to give a speech on such a motion. I suddenly, without any warning, see one tattooed hand rise up from the left corner of my eye, and I'm very confused for a few seconds on what exactly is happening because I've never seen that happen before in my life. And then it takes me about a while to realize it's Sarim and he's raising a POI. And I have to tell him, I don't know what to tell him because I'm used to telling people to sit down, but he's already sitting down. So I don't even know what to tell him. So then I just try and ignore him and hope he puts his hand down. But then he doesn't do that either. So then eventually I think I have to take his POI.
It's my
Very
own
bad.
mind game. I'm also playing mind games.
But
Okay, so what about you, Usher? In terms of like the circuit now compared to then, you obviously competed more actively in the university circuit, but you've adopted a coaching role, I'm guessing, for most of your university life. So you've seen the school circuit evolve over the last 4 or 5 years as well. So what are major takeaways in terms of like how has the circuit changed both in universities and in school?
So it's actually not changed too much from my university years. Like I coached in my senior year, which was post COVID. And like even when I was coaching OPF, like for a few months, I think it was like right in the middle of COVID. So like a lot of the change had started happening. But from when I used to debate in school, which was like 17, 18 back with Nixer, um, apart from like what Masood has already talked about, like I think it's professionalized a fair bit, like in the learning aspect. So obviously, like so there's like a lot more debate videos, workshops, etc. online. But like coaching has genuinely changed. Like both good and bad coaches of my time weren't as much involved with like trying to improve your like just debating skills as much as they were like just judges who जो आपके spar मुस्तकिल judge कर रहे हैं या फिर like they were much more involved in your life personally, and this isn't like a dig at like any particular coach. Like I think just the culture was much less professionalized between like coaches and students, which is why I also think pele it didn't really matter itna like what sort of coach you had versus now. Like for example, you have coaches like in Pakistan, just Kaisar has like figured it out, right? Like year after year consistently good teams. There's Laiba, Shah Jahan was on the circuit coaching for a while, Iqbal back in the day. A lot of these newer people who've come up, or like Kaiser who's been around for ages, Khair, all of these people have now become much more structured and professional with their kids, and I think that's led to the debating itself like improving a lot, which is what everyone else has mentioned. But that's on the good. Like I think the one thing that I miss from my time compared to this one is like narratives, and like sure you have a lot of personalities etc now as well, but I think in my time the circuit for whatever reason felt like there were a lot more wilder stories coming up because obviously like her match is swinging because of some random judge, because there's like fewer schools debating so everyone knows each other much more, there's fewer competitors at the top so the top level genuinely just knows each other. So pehle the circuit felt like it knew everything about everyone. Now the circuit feels more you come to a tournament, you give your speeches, you leave kind of vibes. This is potentially also just true because I'm no longer a school student in there. And now like I have stuff to get to after a tournament. But like that's I think been the experience stuff for me.
Yeah, I think like anybody who attended Karachi Nationals in the past year would probably disagree with you because that was a whole big drama on the circuit. So narratives definitely exist.
Yeah, I think the narratives are there.
Yeah, yeah, probably. I think everybody
Yeah,
who's still an
I,
active
I
But
participant is.
but I think the one thing that I will say, which is a throwback to round three at LSE when Seamal, Alizar's
Seamal.
partner Seamal said that there's all these adults who just get too into like what the kids are doing. I think that there has definitely been the change, at least for instance, my time is that a lot of the coaches are much less involved and like keep that again the professionalization, like they keep more of, at least from what I've seen, keep much more of a barrier between like their personal lives and their children and their students' personal lives, which I think has definitely been a positive development. The kids
In
get
my
up to
time,
them
coaches were your
understanding.
friends. Like they were like good coaches,
Yeah,
especially were like meant to be, कि, oh, like they chill with their kids.
Yeah.
Like now I think like the best coaches are those who have like almost a teacher-esque relationship with their students.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think debate coaching and how it's changed is probably a whole big topic we could get into, but like I think the quick summary is it was pretty awful. How much power a bunch of random people had over kids and how willing they were to exercise it. And it's pretty nice now that we just have a bunch of formal slash informal barriers in place, which uh, introduce a necessary amount of distance into what is otherwise a really creepy relationship if it gets to develop emotionally.
Yeah.
True. Everything is regulated better. And tournaments, I would say, also run better as well. Like
Yeah.
everything runs on time for the most
Yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah.
It finishes on time for the most part. If there is an issue, there's a mechanism to handle that issue. Rather than just going to random places. I guess these are all good things. Like if you go to get feedback to a random coach, you're gonna get feedback in a formal way, and you're not going to be asked to like step out while the other coach is maybe smoking a cigarette, which used to happen in the past and isn't cool, right?
And with the
So
tab, like I've been through too many tournaments in the past where like mid tournament you figure out like who actually galat round dal liya tha two mein, someone else had won. So there's also like a tab now.
yeah, yeah, all of those things about standardizing everything, having some mechanism of regulation and oversight, that's definitely a net positive. Imad, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean,
Or a new
just in
entry?
terms of what Yeah, so just in terms of what Ashar had said on the last time, which was about the way in which this debating activity has become something that people are enjoying more. And I do think that what we've seen is perhaps that the amount of breadth or depth across universities has perhaps reduced, i.e., maybe there are, instead of having like three, four teams from each university or from each like major university, we're getting like one team, etc. But what we are seeing is perhaps that that one team is perhaps more invested within debating, more invested in learning about debating. I think the fact that these this Abdul Wase and then I believe Hamza Javed as well, Park Debate Forum, who are having these spars weekly, both local and international speakers are speaking. I think that reflects a willingness to learn a lot more. And I think in terms of organization, also, there is perhaps more awareness. I don't think the circuit is quite there yet in terms of things like being on time and managing the tournament without logistical issues, but there's at least now much more intent of for seriousness. There's now much more willingness to say, okay, well, we need to prioritize things like time. We need to prioritize things like being able to run logistics properly, etc., which I think was a problem that existed before, and it was almost infuriating sometimes to see that, well, the cap or the OC is just like not taking those kinds of things seriously. And I think we're better off now with that.
Yeah, no, I recall, I think it's either 2016 or 17. I was at a Shajivna, which started 4 hours later than the schedule allotted. Whereas at Shajivna 2024 this year, I think day one ended early, which is, I think, the first time I've ever seen that happen at a Shajivna.
Yeah, so I guess the summary here is that debating has become more competitive, better, and better managed compared like now compared to back when we all started. But some people in the circuit might disagree, but usually it's because they're from that time and are very attached to that time, I would wager. So guys, I guess at this stage, the only thing left to ask is like, what's next? Um, like we know that there's some online tournaments that some of us are going to participate in. There's Dillman happening next weekend. There's US happening this weekend, which none of us chose to essentially CA,
Hang on,
um,
I'm on the Urdu Motions Committee here.
which is
I'm on the English
also
motions
very
committee.
weird. Like again, I don't know how you're. I'm waiting for the motions. Like it's not you deciding the motions. I'm pretty sure it's Google Translate, but um, regardless, we still have like Dillman, Sofia, another international major, and there's a potential for an invitational, if I'm not mistaken, that is also going to be happening, which some here will be capping, some will be participating. So, what's everybody feeling about like these next upcoming tournaments and what they're hoping to achieve or like look to get out of them? I'll start with you, though.
Yeah, I mean, the quick factual summary is I'm speaking Dilliman next weekend. So that's me, Usher, and Imad with the aforementioned Gov Bench, question mark, question mark, question mark. And we are hoping that Gov Bench takes it all the way through. If we don't get Gov Bench in like a break round, I'll be very sad. But, you make do with what you have. I am probably capping the aforementioned invitational, which just context for anybody who's not aware. Abdul Vase previously mentioned of the Pak Debate Forum, very big tournament organizer, organized the Ramzan Debate Open earlier in the year. Will probably be organizing some sort of like local debate invitational where he's inviting a bunch of just like teams which have been doing pretty good throughout the circuit. So should be very high level concentrated competition. And apart from that, yeah, I'm also speaking Sophia Open Part 2 later. As the only, I think, Pakistani reprising currently who broke at edition number one earlier in the year. I'm excited to maintain this record going onward. I hope the rest of you are able to raise your game a little and also manage to break at edition number two. If not, it's okay. I'm accustomed to carrying the burden of success on my back alone. I can manage. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have coming up right now. I am excited to speak more online tournaments if they emerge. Like me, you, Nawaz, and Sarim just recently spoke the Philippine Debate Open, where we did extraordinarily well, and Pakistan Debating Memes made not a single meme about that. So what's that about, huh? And I'm hoping we get to reprise that as well because it's just fun doing online tournaments with people in person as opposed to like in random locations scattered across the country. But yeah, I think that's what we're going into moving forward. Excited to hear what everybody else's thoughts are.
Fair, fair. Saram, what about you? Obviously, you've ditched me and have not attained success since ditching me. So, what are your plans going
Um,
forward
well,
in terms of the tournaments?
we have Delaman coming up. I understand that you guys have a Patreon, and I think that part of your Patreon benefits should be that you guys can pay for me to reg for Delaman, and I'll make my team name whatever you want it to be. I'll give you a shout out at the finals. But yeah, you, me, and Bhakti are hopefully speaking Delaman if we can reg in
We
front of
do need
people.
an op bench in the final.
I think
I think that is
our,
the
our
name we're
team name
going
being
for.
op bench would be really cool. It'd be funny if we faced each other and flipped them. And then Sophia is obviously our revenge arc. Since Taha might have been the only team that broke that Pakistani team that broke there, but we were going to be there if we hadn't been thwarted by
Robbed.
robbed by certain political mal practitioners. Um, Apart from that, there's the Dino Cup, which I've just learned is not in fact a Dino tournament, is an invitational for a lot of other speakers. But I like to call it Jurassic Park just because of how inundated it is with dinos. And I think
I
that's
hope you're
all I
listening,
have
Abdul
for you.
Vasa.
Yeah, I hope you're listening. It's a good name.
Okay, Ahmad, what about you? What things
Well,
are
I
ahead?
just want to clear the air and say that Zaid and I did technically break ESL, but then we chose not to break ESL at Sophia. But regardless, I think for me it's yeah. So like Masood said, we're speaking Diliman in a couple of weeks, and I'd probably be speaking a few more online tournaments in the summers as well. I think for me, what the intention of speaking these is just from time to time. Hope I'm trying to make sure that I don't have too many consecutive weekends of debate because there's that it does get tiring and sort of reduce the amount of fun I'm having. But the purpose then, I think, to speak these tournaments is to just consistently tap into sort of that whole debate culture and vibe periodically. In fact, I think I was recently just discussing with Laiba as as well about how it is that corporate work life sort of numbs you a little bit in terms of especially if you're doing something that you don't really personally enjoy like that much, like it's not something in your field necessarily. So debating is perhaps one instance in which you can sort of tap into that thing with your kind of community, your kind of familiarity, etc. And just that kind of exercise is something that I think I want to keep partaking in and keep sort of enjoying. Like I mentioned in the previous podcast, I think finally with a mindset that doesn't worry too much about the outcome and just worries and just like sort of focuses on the process and of enjoying the speeches that I'm giving much more.
Imad, I think you've just tapped onto a very valuable thing there, completely irrelevant to the meat of what you were saying. But as you've pointed out, debating is often a very nice break from work. I think you should use this valuable opportunity to inform everybody that we are not, in fact, a few rupees away from bankruptcy and as dangerously
Yes.
unemployed as everybody thought last podcast. Losing the LSE 50K does not mean we are near destitution and about to have to sell off our assets.
Ashar had caused significant harm to our reputations from the last podcast. We are not unemployed and on the verge of being on the streets. I am not unemployed. I am working at a place. I've almost 2 years now. We had to clear our name at the LSE round three as well. Some speakers were perhaps accusing us of worrying more about debate than about our livelihoods. So yeah, let's glad to have cleared the air about that.
Okay, Asher, what about you? What's coming up for you?
Yeah, so one online tournament with Masood and Imad, probably not a lot of online stuff after that because like all of you live in one province and it's a flight away and I don't like speaking alone from my room. But the invitational is coming up, so I'll probably speak that. I'll also probably like end up speaking one more tournament in the summers in person, and then very soon like I might have a deeper connection with the great city of Lahore. So in which case I will be speaking much more regularly because in that city like debating will be my only socialization for a while. So yeah, not a lot of debates coming up, but like exciting month ahead at least. And then like I've managed to not win so far after coming back. Like I haven't lost this much before the comeback as much as I have after. So like I think till I can at least clinch a tournament, I'll be coming back.
This reminds me, and I'm ashamed for forgetting, but Fast Islamabad is obviously coming. And listen, to any non-Islamabadis listening to this, please come. Please come. It'll be fun. I promise we all
50K,
have an
right?
equal chance of winning that cash prize. Just come.
I mean, there is the 50K cash prize.
Yeah.
It is reserved for me and Sarim because we've already bribed Taha.
Yeah.
But you can still come because
Yeah.
there is a detachment between the Islamabadi, the Karachi, and the Lahori circuit. And again, shout out to Abdul Basit because he's organizing a lot of tournaments, especially online tournaments that like help connect everybody again. So yeah, I guess like since everything's gone regional from the DSP, there's been a lack of integration, which shouldn't be the case because like if everybody is going to collectively get better, they need to collectively integrate and interact. But okay, final questions just for funs. I just want to ask everybody who would be like, and this could be somebody. I actually maybe two answers. I'm mostly looking for one answer from what you've seen from the circuit this year, and I'm asking for like somebody you guys would like to maybe team with for a tournament, but not from our immediate circles. So like not anybody from this podcast. Somebody that you think, and this doesn't necessarily have to be like a teammate that's like super competitive, or you think would be like a great partner, be successful at a competition, but it could be like somebody who you just think you would have a good time with, or have fun with. So either or, it's your choice. We'll start with you, Usher.
Yeah, so I think I have mine. Like I think it's Hanfia. Like I haven't spoken with Hanfia ever yet. Like he's a first speaker, so like I don't have to go PM. And yeah, like I think it would be very fun. Hanfia बहुत funny है. And like Hanfia does not have the burger limitations that I do. Like उसे actually अखबार पढ़ता है, किताबें पढ़ता है. Like he's also smart. So like yeah, I think Hanfia is my answer.
Fair. Good answer. Emma, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, so I've spoken with I think a range of people over the last several years, but now I think I would prefer. I would be curious about what speaking with Daud Karal would be like. I think in particular at closings, or rather simply the fact that he goes second or is more accustomed or more comfortable at perhaps going second, deputy and whip, i.e., would make it a combination that would allow us to, let's say, focus on our own individual strengths. I obviously don't know much more about like how he preps or how he approaches like case making necessarily. But I think that might be a combination that would work well.
Fair. Fair. Okay, Sarim. Who would you like to ditch me for next?
Um, I'm speaking the upcoming Invitational with Laiba, and that'll definitely be a
That doesn't
different
count.
vibe. I know it doesn't count, but I'm looking forward to that. I definitely like to speak with Hanfia again if that's possible. I mean, Nawaz will
Also
always be the
doesn't count.
homie. I know Nawaz will always be the homie though, so I can't leave. I think out of everyone on the circuit, I think the only honest answer has to be on Hassan Butt. But just has so much character. Like I think that like I'm an incredibly structured, very, calm, flowy speaker, and Hassan Butt is just like this tidal wave of energy. Like I think that contrast would just be, I mean, it'd be like shattering. I think it's something that I want to witness at least. Like I want to know how that mind works. How does he come up with the jukte that he comes up with, bro? Insane.
How do those links in the sheets all come together to make sense? Okay, Da, you've obviously spoken with a lot of people. You've spoken with everybody here in this podcast. Obviously, you've only won with one of them, but yeah, who else would you like to speak with?
You're pretty correct that I've been a very unfaithful speaker. I've not managed to hold down a team for any appreciable amount of time, which probably speaks to my moral failings. I think, unfortunately, the answers I wanted to give in terms of what I think would be the best debate team combo have already been taken. So I think Ali Hanfia probably tops the charts for me as well in terms of just speaker compatibility. That matters a lot. And like Daud Khadal, I just think is like the greatest thing to have happened to the circuit in a while. So would love to see that, although I don't think we'd be a very compatible team. But my funnier answers, which I was brainstorming after Ashar and Ahmad took my correct answers, are one, I think Shanavar and I would be interesting. One, because again, speaker compatibility technically, like he goes first, I go second. But I also think it's funny to just unleash two men with deep voices, which frequently receive compliments, onto one debate team. Like we destroy over their style category, would just be busted at that point. The second option here is Jazib. I will be taking Hassan Butt's teammate because I think the experience of having your partner put their shades on, get up, and say point would be unrivaled. I would not ask a POI on that team. I'd let Jazib handle it. I want to see what it looks like up close.
Yeah, yeah. Jazib is my answer too. And if not Jazib, I'll take one of the Saikas boys for fun. But I guess that's it for this podcast. Hope everybody enjoyed this episode. We'll start having guests on a more frequent basis from now on. Um, Let us know who you would like specifically on the podcast. If you guys have any suggestions, if you want to specifically even be on the podcast, if you feel like you have some thoughts that are worth sharing, let us know, hit us up. But till then, see you all till next time.
Peace.